Great. So thank you everybody again for your patience. My name is Sherry Lehane, and I'm coming to you from Rhode Island, which is why I put up the first slide. Since we're known as the Ocean State, I thought, well, I give my background, at least you have a prettier picture to look at. You're actually looking at Bristol, Rhode Island, where I'm coming to you from. I'm recording in my home here. So I work at the Providence Public Library here in Rhode Island. And to put this presentation in context, I thought I'd give a little bit of a background of what helped us get the learning circles off of the ground in Rhode Island and the Providence Public Library. And then I'll talk a little bit about my philosophy about learning circles and what our plans are in moving forward. While I'm doing this, Nico is going to monitor the chat screen, so please feel free to put in your questions, and he'll decide whether to save them for the end or interrupt me, and you're welcome to interrupt me at any time. So here's the Providence Public Library, where I've been for 18 years, working specifically here in adult education. Nice picture of our building when it opened in 1896. And how it all started. So a little bit of background. I put up these two things, RIFLI, which is the Rhode Island Family Literacy Initiative, and PPL, the Providence Public Library. So RIFLI is an adult education agency, and we're regional. We're based in 5 public library systems throughout the state. So we hold classes for adult immigrants in 5 different library systems, and within each of those systems, a number of libraries. So we're probably in about 7 to 8 different libraries. We have English classes, citizenship classes, transition to college and career classes, and digital literacy classes to adult immigrants. In 2016, the Providence Public Library, who had been our fiscal agent for the 19 years and housed our administrative offices, created an education department. And that education department brought children programming, teen programming, and adult programming, which is RIFLI, under one umbrella. So this marriage also enabled us to think about different models of education in libraries. As adult educators through RIFLI, the concept of learning circles was well aligned with our trends in the adult education field around using technology for teaching and learning. We've been doing a lot with what we call blended learning in adult education, which combines face-to-face and distance learning using technology. So when we started to learn about the peer-to-peer model, we were very excited because we thought that that would be one way to extend our learning options to patrons in the community, as well as, of course, our adult education learners. So a learning circle can be in lieu of a class, or it can be in addition to a class, or it can just be its own thing altogether. To date, we've run a series of citizenship learning circles because we had received several calls for people who wanted a citizenship class, and we run citizenship classes, but we had a waiting list. So if they couldn't attend one of our existing classes, either due to their schedule or possibly due to their English language level, because they need to be a little bit more advanced for citizenship classes, we decided to see if we could get some citizenship learning circles off of the ground. So we ran one back in the spring. It went very well, and then we ran a second one. Here you see some of our students on June 24th. And it has served 2 purposes. One was to accommodate people on the waiting list, but a second one was to on-ramp them so that they would have the skills and knowledge they needed to enter an existing class. And actually a third purpose was for those who were almost ready to take their citizenship exams and interviews, and they wanted a place where they could brush up on their skills a little bit with their peers and really just get the confidence to go ahead and engage in that interview. So we were first introduced to the idea of learning circles through a collaborative project with P2PU University and World Education in Boston. The name of that project was English Now, and it was created to measure the effectiveness in engaging our ESOL learners in learning while they were waitlisted for classes. And we were one of 5 programs that participated. So we had recruited volunteers who had already been working in our education department in the library to run the learning circles. As I speak today, we have a third learning third learning circle around citizenship taking place right now. We also have an ESOL one and a reading and writing. And I'm going to pause here to make mention that I would say about 2 months ago, I had asked through the peer-to-peer community, what are other libraries doing to get learning circles off of the ground? And the response from many of the libraries had been that they were making connections to other programs. So that kind of reconfirmed to me that I was on the right track in trying to get the idea of learning circles off of the ground. I connected to classes and programs that were already in session. So in this case, just to reiterate, the Citizenship Learning Circle, the idea of it came from our existing programming in adult education. Some of the resources that we use that I'm going to go ahead and open up is, as I mentioned, we do use volunteers. One of the reasons that this learning circle I thought worked quite well was because the content was very concrete. One of the main online learning resources that we're using is the website that you see up here, citizenshipstudyguide.com. And it's interactive, which is why I like it. So you can see where I'm pointing that you can also learn it in Spanish. So a lot of our learners were Spanish speakers. They could learn a good part of the content in Spanish. And then when it came to the face-to-face time before and after the online learning part, they're practicing their English. So the quizzes, the flashcards, the writing practice, those are all interactive activities, the matchup games, etc. And when you go into, for example, the Citizenship Study Guide, they can choose whether they want to study American history, government, rights, etc. So generally what we do is we give them the options in some of these sessions of what they want to study and keep it totally open. And other sessions have been a little bit more focused. For example, on symbols, we talked about the American flag, and then we asked them specifically to go into symbols in their online learning part and find out 3 facts about the American flag. And then when we gathered the group again in the face-to-face learning, then everybody shared what they learned. I'm going to take you through another resource. This is on our website, and this is available to all of you, rifleeye.org. When I go into learning resources, it opens up into a PowerPoint, and you are free to customize this PowerPoint to any way you'd like. We don't have any, it's totally open sourced. In just a minute. And what we have here is, if it's opening, what we have here is a menu of services around citizenship. So when learners go into this, they can decide, you know what, I want some more information on the process of citizenship, or I want to know, here it is. So for example, can you all see this? Get help with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services?
Yeah, we can see it. I'm going to share those links to the rest of the group.
Okay, because I'll share them. Okay, so they, go to USC, renew your green card, etc. So each one of those leads to more information. So they're all online resources, and it just gives them, I'm going to go back to here. It's just pretty much a menu of services, so they can decide which one of these. So we wanted to really leave it open as to how they're using their time. Again, it's online. But what they're learning online is up to them. Go back to the presentation. The other thing that I wanted to show you, it was linked improperly here. No, it's not. Okay. Well, we put together a PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint guides served as a guide for the volunteers. So I'll come back to it in a little bit, but basically I wanted to give them a skeleton to work with, so the volunteers had a little bit of guidance, but at the same time they had a lot of flexibility in customizing it. And I have this thumbs up here because that's one of the things that worked out well, was providing some guidance to the volunteers. The volunteers that we used were college students, and I had mentioned before they had already been working in our program, doing some other work around education for us. So they were kind of familiar with the kinds of learners we had and the teaching environments that we had. The online resources, I think, are quite important that they're at the level of the learners, and I wanted to demonstrate that by showing that we chose the citizenshipstudyguide.com because it was also available in Spanish, and that was one advantage to people joining the Learning Circle, was that they could do it in English or Spanish. We also, I might mention, when we can, we do offer a stipend to volunteers. So that kind of helps them get good volunteers in the door. One of the other things that I'll put under my thumbs up list is that the environment was casual, so it wasn't like a formal class, and we strove to create an atmosphere where it was peer sharing and support, and we kept the learner at the center. Some of the learners that came in the door, they sometimes were expecting this kind of formal class, and we needed to set the stage right away that we're not going to be up here as the givers of knowledge. We really want you guys to be studying and then spending the time sharing what you're learning. So as you know, learning circles are defined as being lightly facilitated, and we wanted to keep the emphasis on that. And that's sometimes hard to get through to the volunteers as well, because sometimes they have the impression that they're there as a teacher. So it did require some training. Some of the challenges that we faced was, we mostly had brought in low-level ESOL learners. So there was also some training involved, which we built into the PowerPoint presentation that I mentioned served as a skeleton to guide the volunteers. So like this presentation, there's just a lot of visuals and then some notes for them. Working with ESOL learners, we use a lot of visuals to communicate. As with all learning circles that I've gleaned from talking to others, sometimes attendance was sparse, so sometimes attendance was good, and the next week, I was missing 5 or 6 people. That was a little bit of a challenge. The other thing that was a challenge was the length of time. So we typically ran them from 6 to 8 weeks. That was the amount of time that we thought we could get a group of people to commit to. Actually, at the end, most people wanted more weeks. When we tried running it for more weeks, sometimes we saw the attendance drop off. So I would say to be flexible in moving forward, we'll be flexible. If I can get the volunteer to stay on and get the learners to stay in the circle, I'm more than happy to run it as many weeks as they want. And again, this is content around citizenship that there's not really an end to. If you're running a course that has a beginning date and an end date because it's an online course that runs in a specific amount of weeks, then you would be running in a very definite time frame. This looks like a little bit different. So a typical learning circle for us was 90 minutes. In the first 20 minutes, we had a recap of what was done last week, and we opened this discussion, which was usually along the lines of history or government. But many times, learners had very specific questions to their own needs around their rights as citizens, the rights of their children in schools, and those were all really worthy topics. So we wanted to be flexible and let it be learner-driven. Then students spent 40 minutes online learning with the resources that I just shared with you. And then the last 20 minutes, we did a 10-minute wrap-up and a 10-minute sharing. So in the first 10 minutes, the learners shared what they wanted, and then 10 minutes was a way for the facilitator to kind of summarize what he had just heard, take some notes, and then of course we would send it to them as well. This is not a picture of any of our learners, but thought I would throw that in there, and that one of the things that I think made the Learning Circle was successful was they had a very concrete goal. So not only I mentioned that the resources that we used were concrete, but also they have such a specific goal, it was easy to keep them engaged. And now I'd like to talk the last part about making connections in moving forward. So we wanted to connect with our existing programming, but the bigger goal is to bring learning circles to our library. So as a public institution of free resources and programs for the community, we wanted to find out from staff and community what kind of learning circles would resonate with them. So our preliminary plan for the fall coming up is to fill out a survey. And I took this idea from someone in Detroit, and where's my mouse? And oops, here we go. I thought I would share this with you. This is what I put this out to some of our staff. It will go out again. And I had a list of probably 18 to 20 topics, and I've narrowed it down. So this isn't a finalized list by any means, but this is where we are right now, that we're thinking of putting out this survey on very large poster board. We came up with a variety of topics. This is what the patrons would see. So writing, serve safe, we thought that we would say, this is what you'll learn. Give them room to write comments. And what we're asking is they put little sticky dots near the topic that interests them. You can see up here, it says place a red dot in the column under any topic that you'd like to study. So our ideas right now are serve safe, something around technology. We have a bunch of categories up there: employment skills, financial literacy, the science of happiness, which I took from the peer-to-peer site. And I wanted to spend a few seconds on this last one, which is do it yourself. Not only are we trying to accommodate patrons in learning circles, but we'd also like to accommodate staff. So I went around and talked to some of the staff working at the library, and some of these ideas came from them. And one of the things that they were talking to me about was do it yourself. And I thought, why couldn't I make a playlist of YouTube videos, for example, maybe something better, with things like how to unclog a sink, electrical basics, etc. And we could spend some time where we would all go online into whatever category that they interested, plumbing, electrical, etc. Spend the 20 minutes learning, and then cushion the time before and after the learning with sharing what we're learning. So if there's a bunch of different people interested in DIY projects, collectively we could learn a lot from one another. And I'm going to go back to my presentation. So that's the idea. We haven't rolled this out yet. This is coming up in the fall of 2017, sorry. And I'll post on the community how it goes as we get started. And I put this up here, making connections, because I thought it was important to talk to library staff. So when I talked to our reference librarians, for example, I was trying to find out what kind of learning circles might be helpful. And we haven't gotten that far to really figure out how it might work. But one of the things they shared, for example, was that a lot of patrons don't know how to use databases that are on our library website. So they're constantly kind of going over the same basics over and over. So we're thinking about, well, how can we take a need of patrons, and which also is connected to the need of reference librarians to share that information, and turn it into a learning circle where they'll get the information they need and then they can share it with others. So I specifically wanted to just make the point that we're trying to connect to staff, connect to patrons, and really connect the dots all the way around. So it's still a work in progress. We're very excited about offering this model of learning in our state. And we're piloting a lot of different things. We're learning a lot of different lessons. And I'm happy to keep Griff and the rest of the team posted, and Nico. So that's all I have to share with you. I thank you. I put up my contact information. If you have any questions, you're welcome to contact me anytime.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sherry. So I had a couple quick questions just following up on your presentation. So one thing was, so you mentioned that, you know, some people would ask questions about their rights at the beginning, or kind of follow-up questions about specific things that they might be facing in the citizenship circles. So how did you or your colleagues kind of address those questions if it wasn't related to the content that you were following that day?
Yeah, that's a good question. If they had the answers, and a lot of them they do, we were lucky that the volunteers did spend some time studying up on their own. If they couldn't answer the question, then they wrote it down and they referred the question to one of our teachers, or they looked it up themselves. So, you know, I encourage them not to be afraid if they don't have the answer to something, but let them know that either they'll get the answer or they'll, better yet, guide the students onto where to find the answer. One of those websites that I showed you that came from rifleeye.org, pretty much all the answers are there.
Cool. And the other question before we, there's a couple, like what do you see as the future for kind of hosting these citizenship circles or kind of hosting citizenship preparation courses at the library? I mean, I saw that you were doing, you know, using a great content space. You know, could that be improved? You know, you're currently working with a waiting list, which is really ideal because you have a lot of really keen participants right away. Is there another way you're considering how to run specifically the Learning Circle, the citizenship course at the library?
Well, you know, I put it out to the people that I know in the adult education field, and whether people are on a wait list or not, it's an idea that has really resonated with a lot of different people. So our plan for the future is simply to advertise it with flyers, let people sign up and get an idea of whether they're looking for morning or evening, and then looking for volunteers to run them. So as long as we can find the volunteers and find the space, we'll run them wherever we can. We had a consortium that was funded for the last couple of years, and the funding is not continuing coming up. So that has made it a really ripe area to introduce learning circles to.
Great. Okay, well, I'm just taking a look here. It doesn't seem like any obvious questions are coming up here. I'll just wait for a moment if there's anything coming up. And if not, we will move on to kind of the community call itself. Any questions for Sherry right now? If you can write it in the chat box if you'd like. David asks, Sherry, Sherry, you know if any of the participants have taken or passed the citizenship test? Yeah, I was wondering that as well. Like, have you found out any of the results of people who have taken the citizenship learning circle?
Yes, I know that 2 of them took their tests and had their interviews, but they did. Last I had seen them last month, they didn't have their results yet. But we do intend to follow up.
Great. So next time there'll be a picture of people who have taken citizenship circles in the U.S., not in Australia.
Yes. I might add that some of them transitioned to another class.
Oh, okay.
A structured class. And as a side note, about, I don't know, I think it was about 5 years ago, we actually went into the passport business. So we have a passport office in one of the libraries in the state of Rhode Island, and that helps as well. We haven't actually made the connection to those people yet who apply for passports because they've already gotten their citizenship, but it's in reverse. Once they do get their citizenship, we can refer them to the passport office, and it also, you know, it helps the library as well. So.
Huh. Yeah, I'd be very interested in the specific results.